Hello, welcome back. This will be very interesting video, but first I want to tell you I will not fly this drone anymore, but I want to explain these drones like the components and radio controller and maybe a little tips for better flying. So let's check this out. First, I want to talk about FC and ESC, or we can call it flight controller and electronic speed controller, but I'm using here is flight controller AIO, or we can call it all in one. So flight controller and electronic speed controller is one board built in. And before we choose what type of flight controller we use, we need to know what type of firmware what we want to use first. So if you want to use a flight controller with STM32F405, it will be good for Arduino Pilot firmware. And maybe you want to use STM32F411 CEU6. You just want to use the two open source firmware like Betaflight and iNav. But I recommend you use the STM32F405 for cheap and for beginners play. And there's have to we can use the type of flight controller is STM32H743. It's very good for UAV drones and big project. And next I want to tell about the radio controller, and for this drone I use Express LRS radio controller, and it's open source too, 2.4 gigahertz, and it's very good for long range and maybe UAV too, and for mission planner too. But if you want to use or configure pass through the drone, pass through the remote controller, you can use the Arduino Pilot firmware, and the right MCU is SM32F405 MCU board built in. And this I use SpeedyB AIO F405 flight controller type, and it built in Bluetooth 2 module, so you can configure the flight controller through Bluetooth on computer. And I use a 1000 microfarad capacitor and the compass module KMC H553. And for the GPS, we can use M10 GPS generation. It's good for now. And I use the LED too. LED 12 volts connected to 12-volt regulator. So I not take 12 volts directly from the flight controller, but I step down to from the battery to 12 volts for power up the LEDs. Next, I want to talk about the motor. On this case, I use 2212 and 920 kV motor for 10-inch prop. So it's very good. And if you want to check what type of motor it supports for our props, you need to check off table and Google's, or maybe from sellers, so you can check it and buy the props is safety. And here I use servo motor too for payload development, so we can height lift about, maybe this drone is 1 kilograms, and it's very good for now. So this is the simple about flight controllers components. And this wiring, I have a diagrams too, and you can see it when I DIY or before my flight controller this. So this flight controller is good, right? Choose one for beginners and for DIY quadcopters. And next, for little tips for better flying. So I recommend you to place the GPS module away from power cable from battery, so it's very good to you place it with distance maybe 10 centimeters, so the GPS can lock the satellite signal. And for receiver too, you need to place away from these two components, the receiver and the power cable's battery. And it's very important because if you place the GPS uh place the GPS near these two components, it's very not very not good, because the satellites can reach this GPS, and this GPS can get a signal from the satellites, so you will not get any signal from the satellite. So it's bad if you place it near on these two components. So if you want to place the compass module near from GPS, it's can too, but if you want to place the GPS away from these two components, it's very good. Right, like this my components and wiring too. I use for motor, it's called quadcopter. If you use 6 motor, it's called hexacopter. And if you use two just two more, it's two bicopter. And you need two servo to for control your bicopter fly. And if you use for high life, you need to check your motor and your ESC ampere 2. So specification, it's very important to first you check, because if the motor handle tolerance it's too high, it can broken your ESC. And for the cable, it's very important too, because the GPS cable is can you place distance or place maybe place away from these two components too. And maybe if you want, you can use the copper wire to away from interference magnetometer electromagnetics, so like this, right? And we can control the drones from this radio controller. And I use this for handphones, and this control can very smooth, and it's very good for beginners. Right, that's my video right now. Thank you.